This is Møller Nielsen from Java Code Geeks, and I'm going to teach you how to write clean, efficient code using the H2 memory database. If you want to run tests against a real database like Spring Boot tests, then the H2 database is definitely something for you. It just spins up along with your Spring Boot context. Now, complementary to this video, there will be related articles in the description below. Also, feel free to visit javacodegeeks.com, where we have a lot of other cool tech stuff. And please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you know when we have more stuff coming up. Now, without any further ado, let's get started. So why would we use the H2 database, and actually what is it at all? The H2 database, there's a welcome page at h2database.com. And here it says that the feature of a H2 database is that it's very fast, it's open source, it has a cool JDBC API, which means that we can connect with it with all of our tools. And there's a huge ecosystem because H2 has been around almost forever. It has been around for a long, long time, and it's still being supported. The latest version, 2.1.2, is actually here was actually made June. So it's open source, and it's something that that developers use when they want to connect to a database because it can be embedded. And there is also the mode where it runs in memory. That means that it just starts up whenever your Spring application starts. Whenever your Spring Boot test starts up, then a new instance of the H2 database also starts up. This can also be a bit tricky because sometimes if you want to have your favorite database clients to connect to this in-memory database, then that might not always be possible because it runs inside memory. And when you try to actually connect to this database, then a new in-memory H2 database will be created instead. And I'm going to show some tricks in this video how to get around that. Spoiler alert, the quick fix is actually to set H2 up to actually use a file first, then disconnect from the database, and then we can connect with our favorite database client tool. Then we have this browser-based console application, which is also part of H2, and I'm going to enable that in the Spring application that I have, so then we can actually see what we are placing inside the database. And then we actually do not have any need to connect with our favorite database tool. We can just connect with the browser-based console app if you want to go and debug and see what's actually inside this database right here. It has a small footprint, around 2.5 megabyte jar file size. So it is lightweight, it is really, really fast, and it's easy, and it's just cool for tests. It actually also has some quite advanced features. If we want to use it, we can actually use encrypted databases. That means that all of the values will be encrypted with some key. There's also transaction support actually. There's also there's a multi-version concurrency. The default version, in the default version, you can only connect, if it's a file, for instance, then you can only connect one client to the database at a time. But let us just get started actually and see how we actually use this right here. I'm using IntelliJ, and I've created this new I've created the Spring Boot project right here by pressing File, New Project. Then I've chosen Spring Initializer. I gave it a good name right here. Then I chose Java, Maven, and then I chose JDK 19 and compliance with 17. Then I said I wanted to build a jar instead of a war, make jars, not wars. Then I pressed Next, and then I chose the latest and greatest, latest and stable Spring Boot version, which currently is 2.7.4. Then I added some Spring Web right here because I want to be able to create some REST controllers and maybe make some microservices. So Spring Web is almost always a good thing to add. And then I added some developer tools like Lombok, so I don't have to write all the boilerplate code myself. Then I added Spring Data JPA, which is down here. So this means that now I can make my JPA annotations. I can create relations between my classes, and then I can actually also generate my tables automatically with Spring Data and JPA and Hibernate. Hibernate is what actually executes. That is the engine behind all of the cool annotations. So we have the JPA, that is the definition of what to write on top of all of the member variables, and then there's Hibernate, that's the engine that actually creates SQLs and also executes SQL against the database. Then I added H2 right here, so you can actually just write in the H2, and then you can add the H2 database. Then I also added Postgres, because in this situation right here, in our production environment, we are running Postgres, and then when we want to develop and we want to run our tests, then we are running H2. That is the situation that we are playing with right here. Then I press create, and then I got this this project right here. I created three profiles right here, 3 application properties files, one for each profile. So I have a profile that runs H2 in memory. This is this profile. Then I have a profile that runs H2 as a file, where it actually places a file on the disk. And then I have created one for Postgres. So this would be your production scenario. So this would be whenever we run this in production, then we would use the Postgres profile, the Postgres application profile. It is very easy to choose which one of these we want to run our application with the configuration settings in IntelliJ. So if I go and say edit settings, then I can actually choose right here in this field right here, active profiles down here. Then I can say which profile that I want to run in this runtime configuration. In this situation, I just chose H2, and here I chose Postgres, and in the last one I chose H2 file. So that is simply how I swap between these runs right here. But let us start with the normal setup. Usually you would actually have a H2 memory database like this, and usually you would just copy paste it the default example, which says that you need to name your database testDB, but just for fun, just name it something else. This is just the name of your memory database. And then there's something else right here. We have this DDL auto right here, and that should be set to you can set it to create drop. This means that whenever you are starting up your Spring application, the database will be created and then it will be dropped afterwards again. Since it is a memory database, it will be dropped anyway whenever you stop your Spring application. So just set update. This means that all of your JPA definitions will then be converted into to tables, and your tables will be automatically created whenever your Spring application starts up. Another thing you want in your development environment is that you want this H2 console enabled. You want to set this to true. You also, the console settings trace, should you set that to false or not? That's totally up to you. We have this web allow others. This means that other people can actually connect from their PCs to your PC and then connect to the H2 console. Set this to false per default. You do not need your colleagues to connect to your database on your own private machine. They can just spin up their own database on their own machine if they need one. Username and password. This username and password right here will actually be, this both defines and also sets which username and password to use. So this is both a definition and also and it also tells Spring Boot, JPA, and Hibernate which credentials to use right here. So it's both in this situation. Usually we only tell Spring which credentials actually to use. So we do not define them by actually setting them like in this Postgres example right here. Then we have to define that username should be Postgres. We have to define that the password should be SA when we set up our Postgres database. But enough about that right now. Let us just start our application and see that they can actually start with the H2 like this. And then we look in the log, and then we can actually see that it is actually starting up, and we are quite happy. There was a spaceship that was created, and how come that, Mike? That is because I've cheated a little bit. I've created one entity. I've created one spaceship entity right here. I've annotated it with an entity. This means that this is a JPA entity, and this will be converted and treated as a table. Then I've created an ID. You should always have an ID, and then I have set a generated value. When you use a H2 database, and you set generated value strategy to auto, then what will actually happen behind the scenes is actually that a sequence will actually be used. So a sequence will both be created, and a sequence will also be used to create new IDs for our spaceships right here. Then I have a type of spaceship, then I have a captain, this is another field. All of these fields, because they are native or native wrappers, then they will be converted into columns on the table. So that is the data that I have right here, and then I've already also filled it with a couple of rows, but I'll show you that soon. I've also created a these are not entities yet. No, these are not entities yet, because we want to keep it simple to begin with. So we have the spaceship right here. Let us see, okay, how can we access and see that we actually have a database now, Mike? We can use the H2 console, and that the URL for the H2 console is to go to your Spring application, which is, right now runs on localhost port 8080. Go into a browser. If you have any context, if you have a server context, maybe you have named your server backend or something like that, then of course you have to add that server context in front. I do not have a server context, so I can just write H2 console, and then I can press enter, and then I get this screen right here. And since I now named the database MikeDB instead of TestDB, then of course I have to change this. The username and password are both SA, and I can press test connection if I want to, but I would much rather just connect MikeDB. Was it Mike's with an S? I wrote MikeDB right there. It should be there. Oh, I know why. It's because we need to copy all of this. If you use the tilde, you can see there's a tilde right here. This means that you actually want to connect to a file. So I'm actually trying to connect to a file right there. If I write MEM, then it is a memory database that I try to connect to with the name MikeDB. So let's try again. I connect and see what happens. This time we were in much better luck. Now we are connected to the database, and I can see that I have one table, spaceship, right here. I can go and select some data from my spaceship right here, and I've fed this with 2 rows automatically. I will show you how I've done this, because I'm also using something called Liquibase. And if you don't know what Liquibase is, then you should definitely look it up. Go look at our website or see some of our videos about what Liquibase is and what it's all about, because it is a very cool framework to actually keep track and to edit the definitions of your table when you are in production. But I'm using this already now, so this means that whenever I start up my application, then I get this dummy data right here. I get 2 spaceships. One that has the type that has the shape of a box, and then I have a pyramid spaceship right here. Then I have a captain, Elon, and Olga, and they have some fuel percentage left on the spaceship right here. Look at the IDs. Look at the IDs. They look a bit weird. How can that be that we get -100 and -200? That is because we have created something called a sequence. A sequence is actually just something where we can get the number from. The sequence actually says that we should start with 25. So this means that if we insert a new row, if we insert something into our database, let me just insert something right here. I'll not fill out the ID just for fun. Then we write something else right here. This could be a huge big. Let me just press this one right here, plus, and then it's a huge spaceship, and this could be Mike, and the fuel percentage could be 55% right here. Then I press enter, and I forgot the ID. That's because I have to fill it out automatically when I do it like this. So this means I can actually fill it out with whatever I want to. A good thing is actually if you fill out with your own ID, use negative IDs, because then you can see which IDs that you create and which IDs was actually generated by the sequence or by your application. Again, I'll write huge right here. Then I'll write Mike and 55%. Let us see what actually happens. So now we have that. And if I rerun this SQL right here, I can write an SQL, then I can press Control-Enter to execute this SQL with H2. Then I have my data again right here. Now I have an extra spaceship right here. Of course, this spaceship would disappear whenever I stop my Spring application. When I start it up again, then this data right here would disappear, and this data right here would stay, because this is part of my Liquibase dummy data definitions, which we also will look into. So this is H2. It's quite easy. It's very simple to use, and it's awesome for unit tests. So let me just show you one thing. So now that we can see how cool this H2 is, maybe you were tempted to actually connect with your regular with your favorite database client tool, and this is where many people actually get in trouble, because then they would go and say new data source. Then we will say, this new data source is H2 we want to connect to. We want to connect to the same JDBC as we just wrote, like JDBC, H2, mem, and then MikeDB, and the username and password is SA and SA. And what will happen now? Let us just, we can also choose if you have problems with your H2 database, then you can go look at the driver version by pressing H2 right here. IntelliJ should actually download per default the version that you need, and right now currently the current H2 version is version 2. Let us just go back. So I'll just say apply, and we will say okay. So now I have my Mike's database right here. Let us see what actually happens right here. Where are all my tables? I didn't get any errors, so actually I am connected to the database, but where are all my tables? Where are they? They are actually they're not there, because what actually happened now was that we actually created a new instance. We created a whole new database in memory, because other memory database was actually inside the JVM. So so what happened was actually that we got a whole new database, and now we cannot see our tables. So how can we solve this problem? Because I would like to use my favorite database tool to actually look into and actually look into what is going on, where are my tables, what kind of data do I have. I want to use it to debug my application, of course. How can I do that? First of all, you should not use your favorite DB tool. You should use that console that I showed you just before. But if you really want to do that, then we use the H2 file profile instead. So this means in this situation right here, and just for fun, let me just rename this to MikeDB again. And we can keep this to update again. This just means that when we have this means that it's JPA and Spring that actually creates all of our tables. If you want Liquid-based to control it, then we need to write none there instead. But right now it's okay. The Spring Boot actually creates all of our tables whenever we start up. So let us just press play, and that was the H2 profile. We need to go to our H2 file profile. That's the one we want. Then we press play again, and now again we should get the only difference from before is that actually now a file is created. If you cannot find your file, it's probably because you're using WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux, because your file is being placed. If you go to your Git bash console instead, then you go to your home folder, and then you go look there, and then you can see that here you actually have some new files right here, MikeDB, and that's because they are placed. They're actually placed in your Git bash home folder per default. They're not placed on your WSL instance. So don't try to look at your WSL instance and then you cannot figure out where is this actually located. I'm using Windows and then WSL. That is where I place my code and also my projects, like this project right here. So now we have started up our application. Let's go back to the console right here. So I'll go back and press refresh. Now we have to log in again because we have actually started a whole new database. Now if I want to, I can write file like this. I actually don't have to write the file. It will actually figure out that this is, it will actually figure it out without the file, I think. So you will see, when you see examples with H2, you will see them both with file and without file, and then you will just see a file location right here instead of the keyword mem for memory. Let us just connect. So now I've connected again, and let us just see how many spaceships we have. Again, we have the two default spaceships that I fill in on startup when we start up our application, and this actually comes from Liquid-based. Now again, we will do the same again. We will just add a new spaceship, and we will say -2000, and then we will just name it something, and the captain should be something, and the fuel percentage should also be something. So now we have it right here again. Okay, so now we are in a situation where we want to debug our application. Now we are in a much better place because now we can stop our stop our Spring application by pressing stop. And now I can use my favorite database tool because it is a file. So that means that if I say file and then migdb right here, then I can connect to the file, and I'll just write file in front so we know that this is the connection that we actually want, and then I can press OK. And now I can see there's a migdb. I can see my table. I have a spaceship table right there, right? Cool, and I can see my data. I can then analyze, and then I can find out that okay, my application it initialized my spaceship with only 21 fuel percentage. It should have been 100. So that is where my error is in my code. So then now I know where to look. So that is how to use H2 if you want to go dig into if you want to use your favorite clients. Yeah, and this is IntelliJ's built-in database tool that I'm using right here. You can use whatever other tool you want, of course. This is just an example. I definitely would tell you to use the console instead of trying to use the file right here, because the huge benefit is that you just have it in memory, and whenever you figure something new, whenever you get a good idea, then you just stop your application, and then there's no file to clean up there's nothing to clean up at all. You just have this one in memory. Even if you use a file, then Spring and JPA is actually very, very good at updating your database with the new changes and the new definitions that you have used. So many times you will actually not see any downsides by using a file, except for that. Now there's actually I would not see any downsides except if you're not allowed to write in a folder where you're trying to create your file, and that is also a good enough reason to just use your memory, just start up H2 in memory, because when you're creating your tests, then you don't want that error that you cannot write into a certain folder. You don't want to mess up your CI system with with database files when you don't have to. So, okay, so Mike, what about all those tests you talked about? Can we see an example of that? Does it just work or what? Yes. Let us create a spaceship repository test. I'll go to the end of the spaceship repository, then I press Alt-Enter, and then I say create test. Yes, just create a test. Okay, that was actually already a class that I've created right here. Then I end up down in my test code, which is spaceship repository test, which is right here. I annotate all of this at Spring Boot test. This means that I will get my whole Spring Boot context right here. And now I write something else also. I write something called active profiles, because I want to say that this active profile, we can actually mention more. And if you want to write a list in your annotation, then you need to use the curly brackets right here. If you only have one profile, then you don't need the curly brackets. But I'll just leave the curly brackets just so you can see what actually happens right here. So this means now I'm using the H2 profile right here. And then I'm auto-wiring in the spaceship repository. And remember, this is the only place where it's okay to use the auto-wire. That is down in the tests. You always want to constructor inject your beans when you are in your real code. But here we have the spaceship repository right here. And what am I doing right here? I am counting first. First I count how many spaceships do I have before we start. And then I create a new spaceship. Then I create a new spaceship. So I'm actually creating 2 spaceships. And then I say, print out all of my spaceships just so I can see what's in the database. And then I assert that before +2 equals the current number of spaceship counts. That's quite good, right? That's quite a good test. So let's just run and see what happens when we press play. So, try stuff. And here we have all of the output. We have 4 spaceships, the 2 that we actually create per default, and then we have the other 2, which are the spaceships that we created inside our test. Okay, Mike. Now we have talked about this H2 database. What would happen if we do not want to do that? What if we want to run against a Postgres database, just like we did in we want to run against the real database instead of just using H2 database? Then you can easily use Docker Compose And there's also something called test containers, where they will actually start up these containers when you're running the test. This video will not cover that. We might make other videos about test containers later on. But for now, you can just use this Docker Compose file right here. Then you can press play, because IntelliJ actually supports Docker Compose, and what will start up then, we will have, this is just the logical name, so that means we will actually have a host with the name DB. Here we will use the image named, Docker image named Postgres. We will have a password set to SA. We will map out the port to our local host. This is the default Postgres port. Then we are also using an admin interface. This is a web interface. This means that I can actually go to localhost port 9080, and then I can actually look inside this database right here. That is why we have this admin interface also included right here. Let us just check what is actually going on right here. We already have it started, so we should actually have, so we should have a Docker. We should have a Docker container running, and also the admin right here. To check that, to check up on that, I'll just stop this connection right here, and I will stop this is my application right here. Let me just start my Postgres application. So now I'm going to start my Postgres application. If it does not fail, that means that then it has connected to the Postgres database. Let us just see if it has Postgres. Yeah, it has, right there, use the dialect. That's quite good. So again, I would like to go to my console, to my browser, because inside my browser I can go to localhost port 9080, and here I can choose different kinds of databases that I can connect with this browser application right here called Adminer. If you have not, if you don't know what Adminer is, and if you have never tried it, then try to read up about it and also try it out. You just start it up. You can spin it up. It's free. It is used to actually debug applications and see what's going on. Then we choose Postgres. The logical name for our server was DB, so I'll just choose that. The username is Postgres that's the default username when we're dealing with Postgres, the default administrative username. And then the password, I set that to SA myself. I have not created I'm just using a default database, which is Postgres. That's right there. That's why I did not fill out the space, the database. And as you can see right now, I actually have a spaceship table right here. Are there any data? Let us try to select some data. Yes, we have the usual 2 spaceships right here. So now I'm using a Postgres database, and it was quite easy, as you saw. So the thing that is not easy is when you want to run the tests, of course. And of course, you could also say that running all of those database tests, that would be that those are integration tests, and you don't want those to run out on the CI server. You only want unit tests to run. That's fair enough. And then when you're building up your relations between your different entities, then you can run your tests locally. And then, and then you can just ignore them and then not run them whenever whenever you are running on your CI machine. You can actually also add a profile. The difference between this would actually activate a profile. This will say that this should only run for a certain profile. That is the difference right here. This should only exist for a certain profile that we have right here. So that means that if you run with another profile, then it should not run. And you should actually also scope. You can actually tag your tests. We're using JUnit 5. You can see that because the package name is JUnit Jupiter, and Jupiter is the 5th planet from the Sun. That is why they chose that package name. So this means that we can actually tag our tests. We can tag the whole class. We can also tag each test, and then we can actually include the test that we want to run on our CI server. That is a good way to actually. Then we can say integration. And then we can skip all of our integration tests when we run on a CI server. But I think this video was about the H2 database. I hope you got I hope you understand. I hope you understand the basics, and I hope you understand why it's so important and why it is really awesome and cool to develop up against. There was one more thing I promised you to show. That was actually the liquid-based files. The liquid-based files. Let us just go look at those. I have something called changelog right here. This means that every time I start up, then all of these changes inside this folder will actually be run. So this means that I have a create table in here. That means that a spaceship will automatically be created if it's not already there. With captain type fuel. And if you did not have this, then you'll still get your table because JPA and Hibernate would also automatically create this for you. The reason why this is smart with a good idea with the liquid base is when you are going into production and you want to perform changes to your production database, then you can stepwise add these changes whenever your code reaches the main branch. Here we have the dummy data. We have another change set right here. This is an ID, an author. We can set whatever we want to right here. Then we have the changes right here. That is insert, columns, blah, 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 blah. And then we have a table name. We have a schema name. And look what I'm doing right here. I say that I want this to be inserted for both H2 and PostgreSQL. We can, if I would say not PostgreSQL, then I would not get this spaceship for the PostgreSQL database. So yeah, so that is where the inserts happen. I hope you liked this video. If you did, then please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell because we have a lot of cool stuff coming up. Bye.